Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, namaste, namaskar, pranam, adab, sat sri akal, vanakkam. Hi again to the live chat. And today we have the Zoom lens, that is our photography section. So, we are merging today's live chat with the Zoom lens session into one. And we have an amazing guest with us, Mr. Dinesh Khanna, who is a very renowned photographer and very well known for his work, which he did on the Incredible India. So all the amazing, huge, colorful images which you saw on the airports, on the hoardings, in the magazines, which was part of the promotion of campaign of Incredible India, the Indian tourism, were shot by Dinesh Khanna. He'll be talking to us today about colorful frames, which is area of his specialty. And before we go to him, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about him. But first, okay, so Dinesh Khanna had a very difficult beginning of in his career, like I think most people do, but his was even more so. He started his career with by selling calculators in Chavdi Bazaar, checking quality of garments in a factory in Faridabad, and he also worked in the bar in New York for some time before he joined an advertising agency where he worked for 12 years in client servicing. And towards the end of 12 years, he kind of faced a burnout. And all this while, he was kind of being a rebellious son and was trying to resist his father's footstep, which was photography. But finally, he succumbed to the charm and magnetism of photography, and he started his career in photography. For the last 30 years, he's had a blooming career in photography. He's specialized in he's done photography for advertising, editorial, and corporate clients, specializing in food, still life, people, and interiors. He's published 4 books in photography, namely Bazaar, Living Faith, The Right in the Line, that is President's Bodyguard, and Life in Rashtrapati Bhavan. These are amazing books. If you have seen them, very well and good. If you're not, must make it a point to go through them. He is a managing trustee of Nazar Foundation, which he'll tell us more about once he starts his conversation. He's a co-founder of Delhi Photo Festival, which is, I think, the only and most amazing festival of photography in Delhi. Unfortunately, this year, I think it's not going to be there, but it's been a great festival. He's been a photo curator for Serendipity Art Festival in its first 2 editions. No, that is a very renowned art festival which is held in Goa, and it's been sponsored by the Hero Group. It's an amazing idea where they bring together all art forms in one place towards the end of December over a period of 1 week, and it's a huge festival, a very prestigious one. And he's been the curator for the photography over there. He's visual consultant for Sapedia Foundation. He is also a great teacher of photography, and he's the director of the Dhirish Academy at Museo Camera, which is the only camera museum of its kind in India, started by Aditya Arya. So here we have Dinesh Khanna talking about colorful frames. Dinesh, thank you very much for agreeing to come to our show and for joining us and for sharing your knowledge with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Sonika. Thank you, Sarika. It's a real pleasure being here. And well, I will talk about colorful frames simply because, color has been an integral part of my life. And more so, I think, because it's an integral part of India. And, instinctively and culturally, Indians speak with color. It's to my mind, it's almost like a language. And the other thing which I want to say right in the beginning is that I do believe in today's world that photography, or for that matter, actually visuals, are probably the most spoken in quotes language in the world today. Because if you were to look at the advent of social media, general media, between still photographs and videos, this is a language which people express with, communicate with, more than they do with any other language, whether it's Chinese, whether it's English, whether it's French, no matter what. So that's where I come from. That's my belief. And that is what I would like to share with you in the next probably an hour or so. And taking off from the fact that I do believe that photographs talk, And though I don't quite believe in the fact that the photograph has to be worth 1,000 words, it can be worth 2, 3 also and still make a point. It actually doesn't even have to, say too much. It just might want to express something. That's the beauty of photography, really. So I'm going to be showing a fair number of photographs from different kinds of projects, different books which I've done, different personal journeys which I've undertaken. And I would request, if it's okay with Sanjay, that if anyone wants to ask me questions along the way, through the panel or otherwise, I'll be more than happy to stop and do so. Because I do believe personally that, when one is doing a presentation on Zoom, after a while, it's a very lonely space to be in. And I start feeling a bit like an idiot who's talking to his computer for constraints.
We'll do that. We'll bombard you with questions in that case. No? So you be
Uh,
prepared to receive a shock.
Correct, we are here. We are all watching you. You're not alone.
because और कुछ नहीं तो थोड़ा सा, well, nowadays it's not very nice to cough, but just show some sign of life, that everyone is there.
So a muffled cough behind the mask.
So if I may share screen now and
Please do.
start my presentation. So what I would like to correct Sanjay slightly from my introduction is that the first 3 jobs which he'd mentioned in my bio were not part of a difficult life. For me, that was my education. And I always tell, whether it's my daughters or other young people, that, these kind of real life situations where you actually go in the marketplace to sell to people, to convince them, or the fact that I worked in a factory with people who I normally wouldn't have encountered otherwise, or the fact that I worked as a busboy in a bar in New York, which is something, unfortunately, India is considered to be not quite the thing to do. But the kind of exposure, the kind of connections, the kind of feedback one gets from those kind of situations, I really feel at times that it was more valuable than the economics honors course I did from Delhi University, which is not to, put one down and put one up, but collectively and holistically, to my mind, that's been a great grounding. It's helped me understand people, helped me understand culture, helped me be more open to the fact that people can think differently, can behave differently, and it's not just the way I see the world, that can be the only way. So that's always been something which I would put down to the fact that I was lucky enough actually to be able to be exposed to situations and jobs like those to start off with. The interesting episodes and anecdotes in each of those jobs, but I won't go into that right now because that will then, I'll end up talking here for the next 2.5, 3 hours. But we could probably do that another time. But what I would like to say, oops. The reason why, sorry, I got the wrong key.
Dinesh, we have ample time, so feel free to talk your heart out. No, there is no binding on time. Please. So whatever you want to share, please go ahead. It'll be learning for us. It'll be a good enriching experience for us also.
All right. So, one of the first things which I tell my students, and it's something which I've always believed in, is that photography is a medium, is an art form, depending on how you want to use it. But photography is not about photography. Photography is not about cameras. Photography is not about owning equipment. Photography is not about, if I can only get that particular lens and my work will become better. This is something which has always been, to my mind, unfortunately, in the beginning of anyone's career or engagement with photography, people seem to believe that, unless I have the equipment, unless I can grow my, hardware, I won't be able to take great pictures. The point I want to make right here is that photography for me is more a mental thing. It's more something which comes from the heart. It's not about equipment. It's not about what will I record my images with. It's engaging with subjects which you feel emotional connect with, which you want to engage with, which you want to express about, which you want to communicate about. And once you find that subject or subjects, then you think of, so how should I record this so that I will be able to share this with the world at large. And the world at large doesn't have to be, the entire universe. It could well be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your peers, it could be, other photography lovers. Uh, and that actually also to some extent then dictates how you engage with the subject. So these are the things which one should keep in mind. And that's what I've tried to do as I've engaged with photography through the years, or well, as of now, through the decades, really. The years don't seem to matter anymore. So what I'm really saying is that photography for me is more about emotions, it's about feelings, it's about happiness, it's about sadness, it's about experiences, it's about our senses and how sincerely we engage with the world and what's happening in it. And to put it all together, it's really about storytelling. That's what photography is about. And just to maybe expand on that, I would think that's really what any art form ought to be about. It's not about the form, it's about the art. The art is the content and the form is how you are able to share it. So whether it's dance or whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's sculpture, whether it's photography, don't get too caught up with the form. But first get the content right. And the only way you can get the content right is if you approach the content with the rationality of your mind and the emotionality of your heart, and not the hardware or the software, which is external to you. Oops, why does this keep getting, sorry. So storytelling, people tell stories in different ways. For me, photography has been my language through which I have built stories and told stories. And a very integral part of that is that the grammar of my language of photography is being color. Like for instance, for someone else, language can be French, for someone the language can be Chinese, for someone else the language can be, Sanskrit. For me, the language has been largely color. The photography being the larger language, the grammar of that really has been color. Though it's not been the only one, but it's, I would think about 80 to 85% of my photographs generally have been color. And when I look back at my work and think of why this would have happened, I do believe that a large part of the reason lies in the fact that culturally and historically, Indians as a race, as a culture, have used color to speak, have used color to denote certain things. And it's only in the last few decades, as we've gone into our twist with urbanization, that we've started losing that really. But if you look at rural India, if you look at people still living a traditional life, colored in some form or the other, whether it's in what we wear, or it's in terms of wall paintings, or in terms of how we eat our food and how we present our food, colors played a very, very important part. So I think that is something which when you allow your mind to be open to who you are and where you come from, you'll find that this is what you feel and this is how you engage with things. I had to practice it a lot. It's like even now, and I think so deliberately I'm sitting here wearing a gray t-shirt just to illustrate that point, that today I'm sitting in Gurgaon in a millennium city. I want to come across as an urban Indian. So I wear grays and blacks and whites, and so that's thought to be sophisticated. If I was sitting here wearing a saffron kurta, some of your audience would have thought, "Ye bhakta hai kya?" Or if I'd been sitting here wearing a green gamcha, someone would have thought, "Ki naam to iska Khanna hai, ki Khan hai kya?" So that's how color plays a role. So I'm only giving you those two examples, but you can now expand on that. And virtually every color means something. Like pink means feminine. All right. But purple, for instance, because we imported the sense of purple being a royal color, everyone today thinks it's a royal color. Why? But that's not important. It's just that it's been ascribed royalty. So that's very interesting, and that's something which one has to be careful about when you use color as your grammar in your photography. So that is something which I probably learned in retrospect. One looks back at one's work and sees how that color has been used. But that's the journey I'm going to share with you. All right, so I did touch very briefly on, and thanks Sanjay for the very detailed introduction. So my father was a photographer. I didn't want to follow in footsteps because I thought that's being a victim of the caste system. If in India, father is a photographer, the son becomes a photographer. Father is a factory, the son has to run it. Father is a hatti, he has to go and sit in it. Father is a cobbler, तो आप भी मोची बनेंगे वगैरह. तो मेरे दिमाग में 18-19 साल की उम्र में, is it okay if I switch into Hindi and English? Yeah.
Feel free to use any language you want to use. Punjabi will also do.
Okay. So, when I was about 19, 20, and that's the time I was passing out of college. So, that's the time when, for some reason, I have this sense of rebellion that I will not take up photography, though I love photography as a medium. Unfortunately, my father introduced me to photography when I was about 14, 15 years old, and I had access to cameras and film, and we even had a darkroom at home. But when it came to choosing my profession at that stage, I didn't want to take up photography, and somehow I kind of meandered into advertising, and I spent about a dozen years there. But I didn't felt that, look, my first love and what I would like to do is to do photography as a profession. And also, I was feeling that advertising was taking up so much of my time that I wasn't even getting to do photography as a pastime or even as a hobby. So there came a time when I felt I had to make a choice. And the choice at that stage was very clearly that I would want to be a photographer. So at the good old age of about 32 or 33, I quit, and I was doing very well, if I may say so myself. I was good at advertising. I climbed the ladder very quickly, and I was a branch director of one of India's top creative agencies at that time. But that was it. I said, nahi, ab mere ko photography karni. So that's what I did, and I switched to photography full time. And it was natural for me, I think, at that time to take up advertising photography because that's the only kind of application I knew of photography because of my dozen years in the business earlier. But very soon, or within a year of having done that, I realized that, look, for me, photography is not only about making a living, it's also means of expression. And I want to be also able to use that and not just, be on assignment and shoot whatever, briefs and assignments which come my way. So the other thing which I was very, conscious of is the fact that being a person who had been born and brought up in Delhi, went to schools like Xavier's, then went to Delhi University, to Sri Ram College, and worked between Delhi and Bombay in advertising, that I was that very peculiar Indian who is allowed to live in a bubble of being a modern urban Indian. Whereas, fortunately, I traveled a bit through the years, and I realized that India is actually many Indias, and it lives on many different levels. There are many histories of India which are contemporary and which cheek to cheek with other histories of India, even in today's times. And I was very conscious of the fact that, there was these Indias which belonged to me, but I didn't belong to them. And I wanted to use photography as my way of investigating and interrogating and communicating about those Indias. So even while I was doing advertising photography as a profession, I was very clear that there would be my personal passion, which is travel and which is photography. And so through the 90s, I was traveling all over the country to all kinds of places and shooting, which at that time seemed to be random, but I was engaging with things and subjects which were obviously drawing me to them. And there came a time when I had my first solo exhibition, and then the managing director of Penguin had got in touch with me because he happened to come for the exhibition, and they said they want to do a photo book with me. And I said, wow, that's a great idea. And what a great opportunity, because in the 90s, it was still considered to be a big thing to have a photo book of your own. So I told him that, look, I've been traveling around India for the last 6 or 7 years. Let me just look at my transparency. And this was the era when I was still shooting in film. And see if there are any kind of threads or subjects which I was doing myself without even realizing it, which can then be built up into a photo book. And one thing I was very clear about is that I didn't want to do a book on Rajasthan, or on Madhya Pradesh, or any of those particular cliche kind of subjects. So when I looked at my work, I realized that there were two very strong streams which were there. And one was the traditional markets, so the bazaars of India. And the other was Indians' engagement with faith and religion. And the reason for this, I think, is when I look back, is that these are the two things which we do instinctively and very openly as a society, virtually anywhere in any circumstance around our country. And that is what I had been engaging with, and that's what I've been photographing. And part of my exploration of all these other Indias included, these were the two routes through which I was looking for or finding these various Indias for myself. So these are the two books which then got published. In 2001, Bazaar came out, and in 2004, Living Faith was published. And so I'll start my show of images with just a few pictures from both these books. Let me show you Bazaar first. This is a photograph, and I'm just going to tell you, where I shot this photograph, if I remember at that point of time. If you have a question, please just ask me. Otherwise, it's really, look at this as an engagement of a photographer or of an urban Indian trying to find, in a way, his roots into areas of the country which were not familiar to him, which is me, but was very much a part of the larger context of Indian life. And that's the way I was approaching it. Sorry. So the first picture was shot in Ayodhya. This one was shot somewhere in Tamil Nadu. And this is in Ahmedabad. And what is the common thread across these photographs really is the fact that they are from the traditional bazaars. Also, what I find very important for myself, and which maybe I did kind of mention in passing when I talked about either the caste system or the fact that having worked in a factory or worked in a bar, as far as I'm concerned, is, got as much dignity as if I was to work as a photographer or a doctor or an engineer. As far as I'm concerned, anyone who's in a marketplace is there because they're looking to live a dignified life or making an honest day's work. All right, so that is what my engagement with the bazaar is and the people in there. That's in Goa, and it's not so much now, but earlier in the 90s or 80s and 70s, as the catch was brought in, the market would virtually happen right at the beach. Was in Pushkar. And I was at a tribal mela in a place called Tarnetar in Gujarat. It's actually very interesting. It's that's the area where there are a lot of nomadic tribes, and once a year in August, September, they all congregate in this place called Tarnetar, and they come from all over the state, including from Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, etc. And it's just like a marriage bazaar. It's just people, रिश्ते उस टाइम पे किए जाते हैं. अगर किसी लड़का लड़की को कोई लड़का पसंद आया तो अगर वो भाग के शादी करा देते हैं उस टाइम पे, so the rest of the society can't in any way say no, you can't do that. So that is a very interesting thing.
That's the Indian version of St. Valentine's.
Yeah. And this again, Tarnetar, if I may spend just a minute on this particular photograph, I do try, like I said, to tell stories because the stories are constantly happening in front of us. World is a story. I do look at the street really as a theater, which has a stage, and the people who are there and how they interact with each other and what they do is it's really part of the script of life. So I was in this. This is probably in the early '90s, and I was at Tarnetar in this marriage bazaar of tribals, and what I noticed was that there was this entire row of people selling all these kind of colorful things made of plastic and glass, sitting on the pavements or on various thelas. And most of the tribal women at that time were still wearing the traditional jewelry, which is made of silver and which is made of beautiful metal and very well worked. But a lot of them were pausing and looking at what, to my mind, looked like cheap replicas or bangles, which for God's sake they must have cost probably 4 for a rupee or something or even less, which would replace what they were wearing in terms of these absolutely beautifully crafted silver jewelry. And I was waiting for an opportunity to be able to get this particular frame where I could, counterpose the person's hand and the jewelry with what was being offered as an attraction to her. So that, in a way, is the story of this particular photograph, how the transition from traditionality to supposed modernism or modernity happens. And it's not always necessarily for the better, but they are things like color and form, etc., which make people gullible and help make them change their minds. Color is, like I said, very much a part of the grammar of most Indians instinctively, and that's how it's used. And advertising and communication to do with products has always been something which I found very fascinating because of my engagement with the business earlier. And I also, over the years, have been doing a series which is, I do all these never-ending series, which is called Earning Dignity, and which is about people who work in the bazaars, who set up their little stalls, who display their wares in the most creative way they can possibly think of, to be able to make a living and run their households with dignity. Similarly here, this lady is in Calcutta and selling a jar which she makes herself. And look at the beautiful display she's put up. And so she knows instinctively that colors like yellow and orange attract the eye. A few photographs from my second book. It's called Living Faith. In my head, there's a very distinct difference between faith and religion. Faith is an individual's communion with someone larger or something larger than themselves, which is it's a very individual thing. Whereas religion is, to my mind, a corporatization of people's faith for the benefit of the people who corporatize that faith. It's really just another business as far as I'm concerned. That's what religion is. But faith is something pure. Faith is something which is very individual. Faith is something which is very personal. So that is what I was really searching for. It's these spiritual, rather than the religious.
Very well described by you. Very well.
Sorry?
Very well described by you. That's the fact. And
that's something which I've firmly believed. I actually earlier used to say that I'm an atheist. Then I started thinking that why do I say I'm an atheist? I'm a believer. I'm a believer, and there's something larger than me. Whether I want to call it nature, whether I want to call it universe, whether I want to call it God. It's like, for instance, for me, the sun is a god. And why is the sun God? Because the sun gives light. And why is light important for me? Because I'm a photographer. So what do you engage with? So if I can find that rationality for my own self, why can't I believe that someone else thinks that a tree is God? They might have their own rational root or their own spiritual root or their own personal root to why they think a tree is God. So that is something which hopefully people understand over the years if you engage yourself with that subject. Like, for instance, in this photograph, and the reason why this is on the cover is that for a believer, this stone is Ganesh. And for someone who doesn't know or doesn't believe, this is the stone. So that's, that is part of the riddle of faith and religion. So a few photographs from the book. Like I said, both I was shooting without a project in mind. I was not shooting for a book or an exhibition in the early 90s, but really to explore my country, to explore how it lives, who are my people. Uh, and as, like I mentioned in Bazaar, there were places from as distant as Ahmedabad and Tamil Nadu and all over the country. So that's what I was doing for about 7, 8 years. And this photograph, and so this was happening simultaneously. It's not like I shot Bazaar first and then I said, okay, now let me go out and shoot for Living Faith. It's because the bazaars and the faith thing happens in India at the same time. It's very public. It's very open. It's just, we are entrepreneurs and we are believers. That's, to my mind, if anyone was to tell, say, so what are Indians? I'd say Indians are entrepreneurs and Indians are believers. What are the entrepreneurs at? Depends on the individual. What are the believers in? Depends on the individual. That's the way I approach it. So I was going from a place called Patan in Gujarat to Palitana. And as some of you might know, Palitana is almost the Mecca for Jains, which has got some, I think, 1,050 odd temples on a hilltop. So you find a lot of these sadhvis walking on the road because they go from place to place, just walking. And I saw this group of people who were walking down, and I just stopped my car. What I'd done was I'd taken my Maruti 800, and this is probably in 1993 or 94, and I drove through western and central Gujarat for 5 weeks, just stopping wherever I wanted to, being in a place for 2-3 days and moving on to another town. And that really is one of the best ways to engage yourself with, if you want to just learn and understand about your country or your society or your culture. And especially as a photographer, I think that really worked for me. This is the Ladakh. It's a monastery near Leh. I think it was Thiksay. And as you see, a lot of the photographs in Living Faith are of an individual. I am photographing a lot of these in very crowded situations, but my search is always for that one individual in communion with their God or whatever they think is larger than themselves. This was in Rishikesh. This is Pushkar again. Of course, all these people would be under arrest right now because they definitely have more than 80 grams of ganja on them. So, and you must have been knowing about the Jagannath Yatra, which is the Yatra which happens in Puri every summer. So these are the wheels of one of the 3 ruts over there. And you can imagine the scale of the ruts, if you look at the human size and the size of those wheels. So that's how large those ruts really are. And it was pouring that day, but people were out in their thousands and it didn't seem to matter. And it's again, their belief and the faith which takes them out there. And this is something which is totally irrational, but I absolutely love. And I probably by now have a collection of a few hundred Nazar Battus, which is what they are called. And the one, explanation for the Nazar Buttu, which I like, and there are a number of them which I've heard over the years, is the fact that the favorite food of the devil is something khatta or something mirchi wala. So the reason why people put up nimbus and mirchis at the entrance of whether it's the shop or whether it's the home is that कि अगर कोई शैतान आएगा तो मेरे घर के बाहर ही वो ये प्रसाद खा के वहीं से निकल जाएगा, मेरे घर के अंदर तबाही मचाने नहीं आएगा. Now, whether that's right or wrong, whether it's true or false, how does that matter? If someone believes कि ऐसे हो सकता है, and it makes me feel good, what is wrong with feeling good? So we feel good because we go and see a movie, we feel good because we go and see a play, but someone else might say, but what could you like about that play? It was so stupid. So, there's no universality in terms of what makes a person feel good. So my point is that if this makes someone feel good about what they believe, then let them be. And this was in Ajmer. I'd gone to the Dargah And there is one part of the place where people who are, in a trance or in any way they believe that they are, how do you say it, that the devil is coming to them. So this lady was in the trance, and I shot this portrait of her in that one moment where she seemed to come out of it for just a second. But if you look at her eyes, you can see that she is absolutely not there. She's somewhere else altogether, even though the eye looks like it's looking straight at me. And this is at the Golden Temple in Amritsar. My mother was a Sardarni, and this was the only photograph of mine where she asked me for a print. And she did say, "Ki, eh, badi changi photo hai." And, I don't know what she thought of everything else I shot, but this probably was one redeeming photograph in my entire career as far as my mother was concerned. Which again is because that's where her faith was from, And she thought that the Golden Temple was the ultimate place for her, and if her son has shot one photograph there, and that, to my mind, as a photographer, I love this, because I love the body language of the lady, I love the singularity of the arches, of the water beyond that. So there's a story in this which probably is very different from what my mother takes out. But that's what makes a good photograph as far as I'm concerned. It allows a story to be read into by whoever looks at the picture. The worst kind of photograph is the kind which does not stop a person to make a story out of it. Whether it's my story as a creator or whether it's a story as a viewer, but that is the engagement which, to my mind, is the most important, really. In recent times, of course, as virtually since the mobile phone came along and became a fifth limb of humanity, I'm a great lover of the phone camera. And it actually is the camera with which I shoot all the time and everywhere and everything. So I thought I'd just share a few photographs which I've shot in the last few weeks or few months, really. Because the point I want to make here is that, like I said right in the beginning, that photographs are really made with the mind and the heart and not with the camera. The camera happens to be what I used to record what I really was enjoying or was engaging with, so I could share it with the people in this group and in the world at large. The great thing about phone cameras, of course, is that since it's with you all the time, you can be wherever you are, and that in a way actually expands the genre which you engage with. I'm not normally the kind of person who shoots sunrises and sunsets, but because if I do see one which is really pretty, which like this one was, and I was in Pushkar at that time, because my phone was with me, and I shot this, and this is, I was in a place called Tbilisi in Europe, and this was the balcony of my hotel, and I happened to be out there early in the morning, and I saw this sunrise and said, "Wow, how spectacular is that?" So that's the beauty of a phone camera. It's always with you and lets you record as memories or as moments or as experiences whatever's happening with you at that point of time. And for me, as you can see, the color is very much a part of my glamour. It's something like this. It's the colors, it's the forms, it's the faith, all of it comes together to make this particular story here. The absence of color, as far as I'm concerned, is not colorless, because white too is a color, black too is a color. They say what they have to say. But for a photographer, sensitivity to light is also extremely important. And if you're very sensitive to light, then you are hypersensitive to shadows, because that's what makes light real. It's your understanding and your response to shadows which makes your photographs that much more, have more dimensionality. So these are a few photographs where I'm actually engaging with the shadow here, the form of the shadows rather than the form of the light. So that was, the last one was in Pushkar, but this is my bathroom. My wife is a Kathak dancer. Her costume was lying there on the shoe rack, and the sunlight there was a beam of it just coming through the window. And that's a moment. I'm not saying this is a photograph which needs to go into a book or into an exhibition, but in that moment, it gave me extreme joy. My being able to engage with that light, with that, with that color, and how they were working together, how they were speaking to each other, and they were speaking with me. It doesn't have to have color. It can be gray, it can be black. It's again very much in the bathroom. And it's again that shaft of light on another day. And that's my corduroy jeans which are hanging there. And the texture of the tiles in the back and of the bamboo case. So all these, if you look at it, this really is about shadow and it's about texture. Is the texture of the jeans, is the texture of the bamboo, is the texture of the wall. Each of them has a different tactile feeling to them. Or this is my work table. And for a few days in the year, as everyone knows, the sun traverses from one side to the other, from winter to summer and vice versa. So for a few days, as it's moving to its winter home, there's a shaft of light which comes through my window and falls on the wall right across the room. And that's what I caught here. Some of you might think that I'm crazy, that but this is my engagement. For me, this is my life. And it's 24/7.
Dinesh, every day when I do the dishes in the morning, the sunlight comes in from my kitchen window and falls on the dishes which are drying. And every day, 24/7, I take a picture. Every time. Because the light falls on the dishes. You're not alone.
People, say that I'm a Hindu, so I live according to my religion, or I'm a Muslim, I live according to my religion. I say I'm a photographer, I live according to my religion. This is my religion.
Yeah, and we live with light and shadows, constant companions.
This is a couple of days ago, I think day before yesterday only, when I suddenly noticed that, my God, I can see the sky and it's blue. Nowadays there's a bit of a window as the breeze is picked up and become colder. So all that stubble fire smoke seems to have gone away. And, I love the form which the clouds were forming, and it's just the green of the trees. They've been cleaned up because there's been dew. Or this is from last year when I used to go for a walk in the biodiversity park here in Gurgaon. So here it's, look at the play of color, the blue and the white, the green and the orange. It's they're speaking with each other. Or the streaks of light, falling on a bed of plants. Or this is something which I shot, I think Navratri were just about a couple of weeks ago, and there was this shop selling flowers. No, Diwali ke samay ki baat hai. There's a mandir near my house and someone had put up a stall there. And so these 3-4 pictures are from there. So, when people say, but what subject should I choose? I don't take pictures because I don't know what to shoot. So just open your eyes, open your eyes, open your heart. The world is waiting for you to be photographed. You just look for something which speaks to you. And if you are ready to speak back, if you're ready to acknowledge the existence of things, people, circumstances, situations, I promise you, you'll never be alone. There's always something there to speak with you. And through the pandemic, I've been going for a morning walk for the last few years. I'm very proud of the fact that kuch to main exercise karta hu. And so I continue to do that, and through the summer, because that's the time it was, June, July, etc. Get up at about 5:15, 5:30 and go out for a walk for about an hour. And that's when because one's mindset was somewhat different, one was feeling a sense of isolation. And there's a certain hyper awareness which I think was happening to all of us. And that could have been to do with our relationships, our relationship to our houses, to our homes, to our siblings, to our family. or to things around you. And, for instance, I was never the kind of person who would notice things like this on the roadside. I was never much of a nature photographer. But I started noticing the leaves which were falling, the texture of the road, how the light was working with it, how nature seems to be drawing its own doodles, and which is probably what led me on to doing doodling thereafter, is that look at the form of this one leaf. It's just so poetic. And how something so dainty, when it sits against that rough texture of the road, how beautifully it stands out. Or, in the same vein, these are the kind of plants virtually anyone who has even a potted plant in the house, forget about a large garden, has a plant like this with leaves like this. And if it's out there and if it's rained or the plant has been watered, that's how these water drops sit there. And that's how they interact with the texture of the leaves. So I became very hyper, aware of all these things. And these are, again, they've been shot with my phone camera. It's just not with a DSLR or anything of that sort. Architecture, geometry, graphics, color, all of them come together to make a story. Now, the story doesn't have to have a deep meaning. This doesn't, on one level. On the other, and this is something which a friend of mine said, and what he read into this story was, if you see a CCTV camera on top. And he said, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is a photograph of being in a surveillance state. For me, this was about the yellow and black curb and the pavement and how, beautifully just kind of meandering down, which is what I feel like when I was going for an early morning walk. But he read this as the surveillance state. So again, depending on what cues you have and where the viewer is coming from, as long as they're able to read a story into your photograph, it is something which is worthwhile and makes it engaging. I love playing with forms and with textures. Sarika, of course, is the guru in all this. I'm a very poor second, but I love doing this also, is to look for graphic forms, look for colors, how they speak with each other, how they counterpoint each other. And there was a time my elder daughter was working as a diving instructor in the Andamans, and my younger daughter, that's Mahi, was in this picture, and I had gone there to meet her, and she was on this place called Chidiya Tapu, which is the end of the main island there. And so Mahi was just standing there looking at the sunset, and again, shot with my phone. So, photographs really, like I said, are made with your mind and your awareness. They're not made by what camera you have. So that's never an excuse, really. The other thing God, what a cliche phrase to come from me, bursting with color. I love taking photographs for the sake of the color, which is one, but I also love putting together photographs, whether they're diptychs or triptychs, or which is a number of photographs which then make for a larger story or a larger engagement with each other. So I just want to share a few of those with you. This, of course, is not a triptych. This is part of the Incredible India campaign, which I had shot, not the one with the Taj, but I'd done one earlier. And we photographed these Rajasthani men in Jodhpur. And this is a traditional safa, which we bought from the market, and we got all of them to wear them. But this is one of my favorite, there's some photographs which remain in your mind and your heart forever. And this is, for me, one of those. And this was also done on assignment, but I was photographing Calcutta for a hotel which was opening in Calcutta, and they wanted me to go out and photograph Calcutta the way I would see it, so that they would put up these pictures. So one of the things which I've done was I photographed various residences, obviously old ones, heritage buildings, and I made a collage of various parts of different homes to make this one larger story of the architecture of Calcutta. And on the other hand, this is a collage which has got, I think I forget right now, but probably 45, 50 images. And this has been shot with my phone. And if you might be aware of, there are these weekly hearts which happen all over the city on different days. And, all kinds of household items and spices and clothes and, stuff like that is sold by, the vendors who put up their stalls along a particular road on a Tuesday in one place, on a Wednesday in another place, on a Thursday in another place. So I just walked down that market and I just photographed each one's display. And together it's formed a kaleidoscope of that market. And that's the kind of, color which you encounter in a place like this. It really kind of bombards you. And this was actually, it was done for a show. And it's a print which is sold a number of times because some people really love the profusion of colors. This is going back to what I was talking about.
I think this was, I think you showcased this also at the India Art Fair, if I'm not mistaken.
This is at the Museo Camera. Sorry, the previous picture was at the India Art Fair. Yeah. I think Wonderwall had shown again.
Yeah.
Ajay Rajgadia's place. So during the lockdown, when I was going for my walks, this is what I was photographing with my phone. This is what I was talking about, being hyper aware of the forms and textures of the leaves which had fallen, of the flowers which are flying around, how they were interacting with the surfaces. So I was obsessively doing this for a few months. And interestingly, it's something which has stopped. And I'm not photographing this anymore. I seem to have moved on to something else, which I don't think I'm showing here, but I am doing what is the kind of a series at the moment, which I call, they look like art installations to me. It's whether it's in construction sites, or whether it's, other built areas, how things are just placed and how they speak to each other, and they could well be a Subodh Gupta kind of a, installation. Briefly, if I may, show a few of the pictures I've done for the Incredible India campaign. This was shot, I think, about 13 or 14 years ago, and we were still just transitioning from film photography to digital. And this was, because it was a very major campaign, I shot both on film and on digital because digital was too new. None of us really trusted it fully. And interestingly, the photographs which I used in the campaign were from color transparencies and not digital files. And this was to commemorate the 350th anniversary of the Taj. The Ministry of Tourism, as a part of the larger Incredible India campaign, had asked an agency called Trikaya to do a series of 12 pictures. And I was brought into it largely because the art director and the agency people knew that I was into street photography and worked a lot with color. And in our discussions, what I'd said that, look, I don't want to shoot the Taj as this, beautiful architectural, marvel, because that's not my style. But if you want to bring in the color of India and the life of India, then I would like to do this campaign. So that was how we photographed this. So a lot of this is from, one's experiences. And if you look at your brain as a hard drive, if you travel a lot, if you meet a lot of people, if you let yourself be in different circumstances, if you let yourself be a sponge, then all of it keeps getting collected. And that's how at times it comes out in some form or the other, or in some context or the other. And that is what becomes your reference points for creating images or responding to situations to create images. So these are situations which one has seen happening around India. And not for a moment am I suggesting that in the 1 week we went to photograph this campaign that, we found this happening there organically. No. We set up all these because, you can't expect everything to be there, and you normally had to shoot for 4 or 5 or 6 days. So we knew the situations we wanted to shoot, and we created the situations, and hopefully in a way, and actually probably it is what people think that they are natural, because no one's ever pointed out and said, no, I don't believe this happens. It's like a lot of people who've been around India have seen women drying saris on the river banks, or on the ghats of Varanasi, or, wherever. This is a very normal thing in, different parts of India. So like I said, it's just things which I'd seen, which then we fed into this entire campaign, and we set it up. It's, you see kids playing with kites, whether it's in the lanes, whether it's in the chats, whether it's in the riverbank, you find these kind of, shops, small shops all over the place, selling bangles and selling, colorful necklaces. And the idea was that the Taj should not be an overpowering element. It has to be, if at all, part of the entire story, but it should not overpower the people and the life of India. That's the way which I had envisioned it, and I think and I hope it's worked out that way. The President's Bodyguard is a book which was commissioned by, when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee was the president. One of the things he wanted to do, since he was a full-time, lifetime politician, I believe he felt that the Rashtrapati Bhavan was too remote and too distant from the normal Indian citizen, and he wanted to make it more available and more open. And as a part of that entire thing, a series of 6 books were planned of different aspects of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And I got to photograph the President's Bodyguard and also another book on the life of Rashtrapati Bhavan, because the Rashtrapati Bhavan is actually a 400-acre, estate in which not just the president lives, but it is an entire township which operates, and so that's what I got to photograph. But what I'm going to be sharing with you are photographs from the President's Bodyguard, because I got access to them for a period of almost 2 years. In different aspects, different times of the year, for different ceremonies and different parts of the country where, men of the President's Bodyguard would be, and I'll just explain that to you as I go along. This is the cover of the book. This is, there's this jungle behind the Rashtrapati Bhavan where the horses are taken for the morning drill. So I photographed them there. This is around this time of the year when, it's still not very cold, but there is enough moisture in the air for this kind of play of light to happen in a forest. Same time. And my idea was to, all of us, and again, a lot of it had to do with me, see the pomp and pageantry of the President's Bodyguard, and how they are larger than life in the few events which we encounter them to do with the Rashtrapati. It could be either to do with the Republic Day, or it could be to do with, when some, visiting dignitaries come and being given a guard of honor in the Rashtrapati Bhavan, etc. But anything in any particular society is made up of people. And for me, that is very important. And that is what I want to be able to, engage with and express. So within the President's Bodyguard, they are men, they are people, and they are horses, and there's their relationship with each other. And in that 2 years, what I realized is that, for instance, there's a rule with the President's Bodyguard that any of the sawars have to be at least 6 feet tall. But because they live with the horses, work with the horses, look after the horses, in my head, they became like gentle giants, because that's their entire approach. They are soft, they are, in the traditional way, they are men, they're big and they're muscular and they're strong and all, what have you. But they come across as very gentle and very caring. And that, that dichotomy is something which I want to be able to capture and to be able to get in some of my photographs at least. There's this is the pomp and pageantry which we know of. That's the commandant who's, as soon as the rest of the regiment is ready and before the president comes down, then the commandant rides in. And this is a photograph which normally would be the scene as the regiment leaves for the 26 January ka parade. But obviously I couldn't have shot it on the day, because I would have not been able to sitting in this particular position when the the parade is going down to Rashtrapati Bhavan. So that was the interesting part, that one could actually work on this and set things up, and it was great fun, putting together various situations and photographing them for the book. There's the changing of the guard. And like I said, I used to spend a lot of time, hours, whether it was in the barracks, whether it was in the stables, whether it was in the estate itself, just hang around. I became friends with all the Sawars. I was part of the family in a way almost. And so I was able to be, to photograph situations which, normally one would not encounter otherwise. And to me, when I talk about the gentle giant, this photograph really speaks that as loudly or as, eloquently as my words can. If we look at the expression on his face, the hand gesture, the expression on the horse's face, the interaction between the two, to me, this is what embodies the president's bodyguard and the relationship as Sawar and horse. And it's not just about the pomp and the pageantry and the grandeur and what have you. Same thing. Of course, all of them are very proud and very accomplished and talented horsemen, and some of them, then develop certain skills like tent pegging and polo and what have you. The other interesting thing about the president bodyguard, am I taking too much time?
Not at all, Dinesh. Please go ahead.
Okay. That as far as the Sawars are concerned, they've joined the Indian Army. They've not just joined the president's bodyguard. And I hate to say it, but if they were to only be in that particular duty, then they would be virtually the ornaments of the Rashtrapati Bhavan and the ornaments around of the president. So the army is very sensitive and, to my mind, extremely, knowledgeable in a way about how, the soldier would feel. So every few years, each Sawar is sent to Agra. This is Agra, where the paratroopers, base is, and they train there as paratroopers and they can be staying at the base for about 6 months or so. Or they sent to Siachen, where they train and then they are on duty on the glacier for anything from 3 months to 6 months. Or they could be sent to Pune and be with the armored division. So I got to go to these various places too and photograph, because these are also aspects of their lives. And it's not just for the horses, and it's not just about the grandeur of the Rashtrapati. This is at the base camp in Siachen during the training. Unfortunately, at that time, we couldn't get permission for me to be able to get onto a helicopter and go to one of the camps on the glacier itself. But I was at the base camp for about 3 or 4 days and photographed various aspects of the training. And I was working with this very talented writer and person who was researching for the book, Yashaswini Chandra. And so she had been looking at a lot of the archival material to do with the president's bodyguard, because this actually is the oldest regiment of the Indian Army. And as you know, the British were heavily into photographing and, or illustrating whatever, was part of their dominion and their empire. And I'd seen the old illustrations of the president's bodyguard, and I wanted to replicate that as a portrait. And we did a series of such portraits in the style which was very much, in a way timeless, because that's the way they have been portrayed for the last more than 100 years, but obviously as photographs of today's time. And that's the back cover of the book. So, and which brings me to Banaras. I get obsessed with certain things, but I don't get obsessed with one thing at a time. And I follow it for a few months or a few years at times. And Banaras is a place I've been going to for the last 30 or more years. But last 14 to 15 years, specifically with the idea of Banaras being a microcosm of India, and I want to explore it to see how it represents the larger country. Because I didn't want to, by mid 2000, whatever they are called, 2004 or 5, I didn't want to be, running around the entire country. But since I went to Banaras, I felt that, Banaras is the kind of city which, in a way, represents all I love about India and all that makes me uncomfortable about India, both. simultaneously at the same time. I love Banaras and I hate Banaras as much as I love India and I hate certain aspects of India. And which is true for all of us if we are honest to ourselves, that that's the kind of range of emotions one feels about one country, one society, including about one's family, etc. So Banaras for me became that place which I wanted to explore. Also, though Banaras might be the Vatican for Hindus or the Mecca for Hindus, it's also a city which has an everyday life. It's also where people live and go around doing their everyday chores, and for me that is a very interesting aspect of any place or any society. So that is why the title Everyday and Eternity. Banaras is known as the eternal city, so that's one aspect of it, the largeness of what happens in Banaras, whether it's festivals, whether it's the religious activities. But there's an everydayness which also is part of Banaras. So, I want to investigate and photograph both aspects really. So, like I said, I've been doing this for the last 14 or 15 years. I've been to Banaras about 30 something times. And I am working on a book, and currently there's a friend of mine who is helping me design that. We're just going through the, 14 or 15,000 images I've shot to arrive at about 100, which represents my vision of this city. That's a canvas I work with. I love crowds, I love color, I love the commotion, I love the chaos. But in that, this is what I search for. I look for that moment, I look for that isolation, I look for that individual. For me, that's what that larger canvas allows me. Including moments of which make you laugh as much as make you feel spiritual. I love human interaction. For me, like I said, the street or the world at large is like a theater, is a stage on which characters come and go as per their own script, and I don't tell them what to do. I just wait to see what is interesting. That's the beauty of Banaras, that it draws pilgrims from all over the country. And it's like I said, it's a microcosm of India. And whether it's people from Telangana, whether it's people from Gujarat, whether it's people from Maharashtra, or the small villages of Gujarat, of Rajasthan, Punjab, and each of them, bring their traditions and their culture to Varanasi. And they go through their rituals and their prayers in the way they would do so in their own hometown or in their own place. So, like, these people are from Telangana, and this is the ritual they have. They carry these sacks with, I'm sorry, I don't remember right now what's in them. So if they were to go to a temple back in their hometown, in the villages, this is how they would do it. So even though they're in Banaras here, this is how they go to pray. You might have heard of that in a couple of years ago, there is this proposal. It's not a proposal anymore, it's now a project, whereby a certain section of the ghats and the building leading up to the main temple have been cleared so that a larger access is possible from the riverside now. But otherwise, people had to go through very narrow lanes to get there. So it was very controversial to start with, but I guess the government in power thinks it's something which they ought to do to be able to make the temple more accessible. And I happened to be there at the time when the demolitions were happening. So the attempt was to try and make sure that the main temples or the important ones are not broken down. And what's broken really are homes and other such buildings. So here was one temple where Pujari was still very much, going about his ritual. I love photographing people, their expressions, how they dress, what they wear, how they interact. I love looking at little details of color. for me, this lady, did she do this instinctively or is something which she thought, and it doesn't really matter even, that did she decide that today I'm going to wear pink sari, so therefore I should wear red bangles, or is that just what happened for her? And for me, what happened is that she's standing in front of this beautiful orange color. So together it makes, a story which is in a way larger than her and larger than me. This is pilgrims waiting for the evening aarti to start at the Dasashwamedh Ghat. And as you can see with the two ladies on the extreme left and right, they've had their head shaved because that's the kind of tradition they have where they come from. That like they would be going, Tirupati would probably be the main temple, and that's where the tradition of shaving your hair and offering your hair as an offering to God. So they do this also when they come to Banaras. And there's a place called there's a beautiful place called the Nepali temple. It's actually the Nepali style of architecture and it's run by Nepalis. And Banaras has this particular festival peculiar to the city itself called Dev Dipavali, which happens 20 days after the normal Diwali. And this I photographed in that day. And it's something which happens on the ghats, and there are hundreds and thousands, if not lakhs of, diyas which are put up all over the place. But I was just looking for that, that one person and that person's own interaction with his faith. So that's why I was at the temple, and this is the photograph. For me, this embodies that sense of piety for that temple. Okay, so I am obsessive about certain things, and they are, when you, like for instance, when you're a doctor, there's a particular, expertise you have which you stay with through your life. You might, deepen that expertise, or you might widen that expertise. So as a photographer, for me, what I've realized is that something which is of abiding interest is the bazaars. And wherever I go, if I can find the time, and I try and make time for myself, I will try and go to the local bazaar, not the malls, but the traditional bazaar. So that's where I think the culture of the ordinary or the Aam Aadmi of that country or that city or that town comes through in terms of who they are, how they dress, how they interact, what they sell, what they buy. So I'm just going to share a few photographs from Vietnam, China, Tanzania, and India, which I've shot over the last couple of years. Vietnam, actually, I was there with my younger daughter, January of this year. So the last major trip one has done. Thereafter, of course, what happened to our world. So this was in Vietnam. And like I said, for me, this is the canvas. I love this. I love the chaos. I love the crowds. And people, including my family, think that I'm nuts. They say, why? What are you doing there? There's so many people. I said, but that's why I'm there. So the colors, the texture, the smells, the sounds, the interaction, it's so alive, it's so great. So it's the larger canvases, it's the smaller details, this one talks about getting into a zone, and that's what if I'm in a bazaar, I feel like I've gone into a zone. Everything is magnified for me. And somewhere along the way, you also learn how to be invisible, so that people are not really aware of being there. And you can see the bazaars are bursting with color. I don't need to order it separately. It's all there. It's ye le aur kitne chahiye, And I really enjoy working with form and color and body language and elements which speak to each other. So, for instance, this photograph is very simple. It's actually a nothing moment, and that's what I love about it. There's nothing special about it. But it's that moment in the universe when everything conspired there for me. I love the ordinary. I think the ordinary is truly extraordinary. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is that I want you to get a sense of, how there's a commonality across cultures and countries, but there's a peculiarity which is there too. So there's nothing like the bazaar which tells you that better than, malls don't do that, because malls have been globalized. There's a template, whether you're in Toronto or whether you're in Tamil Nadu, a mall is a mall. The brands are the same. The displays are the same, because it's just not individual. Whereas a bazaar is very individual. It's the entrepreneurship of the individual who is, earning their dignity by being in that bazaar and selling what they have to sell on that particular day. This is a small village in China. I've been doing a assignment for a foundation, and I've been photographing organic cotton cultivation in China, Tanzania, and India. So that's allowed me to also, look at the story of the life of farmers. And these are places that actually the normal tourist doesn't get to go to, because this is really small villages in the interiors of places like China and Tanzania, where I've been lucky enough to be there because of the assignment. Like you'll find this is, at first glance, is something which you could be seeing in Lajpat Nagar. But when you look at closely, there's a similarity in the kind of things which are being sold, but there's a peculiarity in the design which is very Chinese. So the functionality would be universal, but how it's constructed and materials which are used would be very peculiar to that place. And I find that extremely fascinating. The kind of spices which are sold, or the kind of ordinary vegetables. There's something which is very similar, and there's something which is very peculiar, because each place has its own kind of thing which you'll find there. And you see, it's in a way, if you are, sensitive to it, it tells you about the state of society, what, level of sophistication or modernization. I mean, the use of color in Tanzania is so much like the use of color in India. It's if you see, actually, a lot of traditional societies, color has been, so integral a part of the language. There's an auction happening in the island of Zanzibar, in the wholesale market for seafood there. Then I like to play with, how colors speak with each other. You don't normally expect to see a purple and yellow and blue, and that's it. And that's what this photograph is about. There's nothing more. There's nothing less. It's the dignity of the communication between purple and yellow and blue and white. Period. That's it. There's no larger purpose. There's no larger story. But that's a great story. So like I said, for me, photography is a language, and language can be spoken to just make a little point. It doesn't always have to be. If I'm speaking to you, I'm not always making large points. I could be just chit-chatting. I could just be. It could be idle talk. So there's certain photographs which are just that, but that doesn't make them any less, interesting. These are the Indian bazaars. This is in Madhya Pradesh, in a place called Jhabua, which has this wonderful festival called Bhagoria, which happens around Holi, and where again, the tribals from around that area come and congregate. Normally for about one afternoon or an afternoon and evening, and there's a lot of singing and dancing. Or this is one of the gullies of Jama Masjid during Eid. Looks like an alien planet considering what we've been through in the last few months, actually. What are these people doing, sticking to each other? What happened to social distancing? But this is the world I love, and I hope we can get back to it at some point. This is a market in Mapsa in Goa. Early morning, setting up. And I love the way people, and that's what I mean by everyone being an entrepreneur, that you make it a point to display things in a way that it's attractive. It's their own sense of aesthetic.
I think Indians have an inherent sense of color.
Yeah.
I have this aunt, who's a designer, and we were posted in Jodhpur, and I wanted to pick up some fabric, and she told me just buy what the locals are buying. The colors, you want to pick a sari, pick a sari in a color that the locals are wearing. So buy that narangi, buy that yellow, buy that, turquoise. And Indians are never wrong with color.
But as we're getting more urbanized and supposedly more modern or globalized, we are losing that. We are losing that instinct, and it's considered to be more sophisticated to wear the gray I'm wearing or the blacks and the browns and what have you. The flower market in this place called the Malik Ghat in Kolkata. This is in, I think, in Hyderabad. Calcutta. So it's, this is something I've been photographing, and I don't get bored of it, and I love it every time. I still go into a bazaar. I've probably been to 300 bazaars by now. I've shot flowers for 30,000 times, but they're fresh every time. It's a fresh engagement. It's just almost like if I was to ask Dr. Dhawan that, are you bored meeting this patient who is telling you about this malady which you've heard from 595 other people? No, you're not. For you, that is the first time to that person's important. Because otherwise, there'll be a fallback on your engagement with that person. But you're alive to what that person is feeling and thinking and wanting.
Dinesh, have you observed that wherever in the world or in India, the sun shines brighter and harsher, the colors that people wear and people use are also much brighter.
Yeah.
Where the sun is subdued, as you go up the latitude, the colors become muted, and people wear darker, maybe more muted colors and all. And I could not really find the logic to it, but that's an observation which I made. So if you go down south, if you go towards Rajasthan or the coastal areas, the colors on the houses, the colors of the clothes, the colors of things are much, much more bright.
Again, the Mapsa market in Goa. And this was in Tamil Nadu. And again, as a street photographer, if I might spend a moment on this, Uh, I'm in this town. I think it's called Tiruvannamalai. I'm sorry, it's a very long name, and I'm a Punjabi, and I can't say more than two syllables at a time. So forgive me for that. Uh, and it's very crowded. There are hundreds and thousands of people, and I notice this is again the chariot, which is not used anymore, but it's standing outside the temple now. And I love the symmetry of the two wheels and the yellow and the orange. And I love the way it was playing with the yellow of the bananas and the yellow of the crates lying there. And I took that photograph. And as I was about to walk away, this yellow scooter came and stopped there. I said, that's interesting. So do you think, and this is not me as a street photographer, I'm looking for something to balance the yellow scooter on the other side. And it's all will things to happen, when you're really in the work. And I saw this lady walking from the left across. Now, remember that I am across the street, I'm using a zoom lens, and there are hundreds of people walking up and down. And there are buses and there are rickshaws and there are cows and there are buffaloes and what have you, crossing perpetually. But I'm looking for that 1 second window when everything falls in place. Now, 99 out of 100 times it does not happen. But that 1 out of 100 times when it does happen and your senses are just, tuned to it, that's when you get a photograph, it makes you go, ah. And for me, that's when a photograph works, is that it makes me go, ah. That's it. I don't want any more compliments from myself or anyone else. It should get that ah from you. It doesn't have to give you meaning. It doesn't have to tell you about the universe. It doesn't have to tell you about where society is going. Will it change the world? Will it make people's lives better? The other photographers do that much better than I do. They must do it. I'm not that kind of photographer. I just love playing these games with myself, and this is what I like.
Dinesh, this is a question I wanted to ask you for a long time. Because over the years, whatever I've been observing of your work, and I'm like really a novice in that, but I always kind of felt that the previous photograph, that kind of street photography is not something that you've always been doing. It's come to you like really lately. So you think it's not I like colors and documenting India is, you can see the love in all the frames that you make and create. It comes instinctively to you. But this kind of photography is very recent, and it's like, are you doing it under pressure because you want to do it because more people are doing it now? Or is it that, you want to see that whether you can also do it or not? I always felt that.
I would think it's a very good observation. It's probably the mix of all you've said. It's also just to add one more reason, which, because I've also, tried to think of why am I trying to do this, is when you've been doing a certain kind of photography, after a point, no matter the fact that you love it, it also gets boring. You feel that you're being repetitive. I actually stopped doing street photography a few years ago because I felt that I was just going out and looking for and finding the same kind of situation. Because the way you look at the world is the way you look at the world. So I started looking for a challenge. I started trying to pre-visualize the situation, trying to make the picture a bit more complex. Has it come from my looking at other people's work? I'm sure it does. Am I trying to follow a trend? Maybe I am. Is it something which is engaging me? Definitely yes.
It's like a challenge.
But is it the only thing I'm doing? No, it's not. But I'm still doing the smaller things that I used to. I'm still looking at that red talking to the blue, and I'm still looking at that purple, counterpointing the yellow. I'm still doing that. But yes, I'm also looking for somewhat larger kind of views. And if I may, when one was shooting on film, one had to be very careful. Both technologically, because film was an unforgiving master. The moment you clicked is what was frozen forever, and there were no erasers and Lightrooms and Photoshops thereafter. So you brought all your experience of shooting to that moment, and you knew that this is what's going to be it. And I was only shooting color transparency, so this was the bilkul hi kuch scope nahi tha. With digital, I will admit, and why not, that I become more promiscuous. I'm looking to be able to do things, but it's not costing me both in terms of time, effort, and very importantly, money. All right. So, like I said, I'm standing across the road where there's perpetual traffic. All right. I'm ready to say that 99 of the pictures might be shitty, and which probably was in this case. It's not like this is the only photograph I shot. There are about 15 or 12 which would have been junked. But this one worked with, it was in my head that I hope this happens. So it is a continuum, but it is something which is built up over time. And yes, I will be the first one to say I am deeply influenced and inspired by other people's work. And I always tell my students, for God's sake, don't just look at your own photographs. Look at the work of others. Understand what people are doing. Copy it. If you have to start by copying it, copy it. Because it's easy to say I'll copy it, but when you go out there, I can't copy a Raghurai photograph, even though I love it. Because I will then, in that situation, still be looking at it the way I look at it. And I love this phrase which I read somewhere that, if no one looks the same way at anything which you're looking at, because the way you see it is totally different. They don't see what you see, even though they're looking at it. It's because the seeing is done by your mind and heart, the looking is done by everyone's eyes.
It's like Anais Nin, she said, no, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So all this is an amalgam of, what's happening in the world, what other people are doing, what you experience with yourself, what you're influenced by other people's work. It's the point of making it, be open. Be open to as much influence, as much inspiration as you can find. And if it looks like other people's work, so be it. I mean, what better way of paying a compliment to another photographer than say, hey, listen, I took this picture which I think looks like yours. As long as I'm not saying that I stole that some person's photograph and put my mark there, which a lot of people have done with my photographs, unfortunately. But I used to get upset about that at one time. Then I said, if people are happy doing that and they feel good about it, I'm not going to go chasing the world. Ki tune mera kyun chori kiya wagaira. Tell you happy to live with it, you live with it then. Yeah. And especially with the internet and with social media today, where are you going to go looking for people?
Very true.
That's in Banaras. This is utterly fabulous Banarsi dessert, which also you get in Old Delhi. In Delhi, it's called Daulat Ki Chaat, and in Banaras, it's called Malayo. And it's made with milk, which is beaten and left on the terrace in the winters at night, and how the dew falls on it. And it's just like the lightest or tasty thing you can ever have. So if you ever go to Banaras in the winters, and I think from now on, Malayo would be available. So that's these are the other kind of photographs I love taking nowadays. It's just I look at geometry, I look at form, I look at the graphicness. It's not just about the color, but color in its absence also plays a role. It's if you see there's a repetition of the rounds of the roti and the aate ke laddus and the karchi. That's a game. You play games with yourself. That's how you move on and stay engaged with the particular art form. Okay, I hope I'm coming towards the end of 1 second. Let me see. I've got another 20 minutes. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Absolutely okay. Absolutely perfect.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
This is something which is always fascinated me, especially since we come from an old country. And we come from a country which is, in words, right, to say that, we have a 5,000-year-old culture and civilization, and so therefore we should be proud of it. But when it comes to actually looking after that, we don't really give it enough importance. And fortunately, our old cities are strewn with old buildings, which have a certain character, certain architecture, certain style, certain wisdom of architecture. Uh, and these old buildings, to my mind, house old stories. And when these old buildings will die, the stories will die with them. So wherever I go, I also photograph old buildings and the life around them. I have a particular fascination or obsession for doors, windows, and walls. To me, they are the face of a building. It's like they speak to me. And look at this, someone actually went and said, कि, अच्छा ये दरवाजा नीला करना और ये arches हरे करना. How much more beautiful can that be? Similar architectural style, but so much different from the previous one. And look at the intricacy of the work on top towards the left hand side. And we've lost that in one generation. I mean, it's amazing how a country which had so much craft and so much art in our craft and so much sensibility in what we could do with things like thread and fabric and stone and wood, and we've just let it go. We just threw it all away. I find that really astonishing how, and especially as the people who otherwise want to hold on to the fact that we are grand because we were grand, but don't want to hold on to what made us all that. And architecture is a very, very, interesting part of that, or an aspect of that, because a lot of the old architecture actually is, in a way, a collection of the wisdom of how to live in a certain area or in a certain geography or in a certain circumstance. And we just abandoned that entirely and adopted architectural styles which are totally alien, not just in the aesthetic, but in the wisdom for our way of life and our, climatic conditions. I find that astonishing, actually. So this is something which I've always loved and I continue to do, is to look for colors or different forms or media to be speaking to each other, or different colors speaking to each other. And like I said earlier, for me, the ordinary and the nothing moment is a great moment. I love the nothing moment. All right, I just, even though I was warned that food needs khana.
But it's time for dinner, so we can have some food now. Serve us something really very, very delicious.
I'm just going to run through about a dozen photographs of, because in my commercial work for the last couple of decades, I've been doing a lot of work for hospitality industry. So therefore, that's really interiors and architecture in hotels and restaurants, and also food. And food has been a very, very favorite genre of commercial photography for me. Because I love the intricacy, I love the textures, the tonalities, the colors, working with chefs who know how to put it together, stylists who know how to put it together. So it's always been something which I really enjoy doing. So that's the only bit of commercial work which I'm actually sharing with you, but I thought this might be interesting. And because, again, this is one sense of color which is coming into play.
Dinesh, in commercial photography, your gear will matter, right? Or will you stick to the same maxim which you said that it doesn't matter?
There's no way you can shoot this kind of photograph unless you've got proper lighting and an understanding of the lighting. And for instance, the camera in this case, what's important is that you have a tilt shift lens. So I can play with the depth of field and the focal planes, which you can't do with the cell phone, for instance. But in today's times, because you have software which you can play with your image and the pixels, you could probably arrive at this through Photoshop. But I've always enjoyed working with the purity of the image. And, for instance, each and every one of these food photographs I'm showing, even though it's believed that, food photograph, all kinds of different things are used and whatever. Any one of the dishes I'm showing you, you can put that fork in there and eat the food. So there's nothing which is, artificial. Yes, food served for the camera needs to be prepared somewhat differently than food which is meant for consumption. There are times when you undercook certain things. So like, for instance, the greens would actually lose their luster if they were cooked or boiled up to the point where it was good for eating. But you want the freshness to be retained when you're doing it for the camera. So that's kind of thing which one is sensitive about. But otherwise, they're all natural ingredients, and whatever is actually goes into the dishes. And which is actually a good thing, because over the last 10, 15 years, especially hotels and restaurants for whom the reputation matters, don't want to have fingers being pointed at them that आपने उस dish में ये ऐसे दिखाया था, but ये मेरे table पे जो पड़ा है ये कुछ और है. No, a tiramisu is not served like this, because that's a creative license, and which, of course, it was interesting that, it just happened that this glass fell, and the chef said, "Oh, shoot this." I said, "But listen, isn't there? That's not the way." He said, "No, it's looking so fabulous." So, but what's inside there is what you would eat. So like I said, that's what I like about food. One, it's you're working in a very small environment. You're working with other people who are experts in their own fields, whether they're chefs or food stylists or art directors. And you get to work with texture and color and form, and and the blending of those takes it to another level. Like telling little stories to photographs and the point of view which this is obviously the fruits of champagne. And what is champagne normally? When I say champagne, what does it mean? Celebration. And how do you celebrate normally? By saying cheers. And how do you say cheers? By raising a glass. So the point of view, as a photographer, what do? You shoot it from a lower angle, so that the person who's viewing the picture gets a sense of celebration. If the same thing I shot from a higher angle, then you won't get that sense of, saying cheers. In fact, with drinks also now, there's a lot of experimentation which is being done in terms of presentation, in terms of blending and what have you. And so I really enjoy working with bar experts and chefs, and so they're artists now. It's being able to put together food to make it something which is enjoyable, and on top of that to make it look attractive. I think it's a very special art. And that incidentally is something which, people do ask me that, you do so much street work and you do so much, real life kind of photography. Don't you feel restricted when you work on commercial assignments? I say it's exactly for the reason that I do so much, which I'm free to do, that I love being part of a team when I'm working on a commercial assignment. It's wonderful when you're working towards an end, that you are supposed to produce a picture which will then be used to promote something. You're working to a brief. There is, an objective. and there's a team of people, each of them coming to it with their own expertise, and that's when you work with people who you can respect. Again, using Sanjay's example, if you're a surgeon, I mean, you want to be with people who you respect in that surgery, and not some bumbling idiot who doesn't know the difference between a scissor and whatever else. So, okay, just running through quickly because I'm actually showing you these photographs because a lot of people keep asking me that, but isn't street photography supposed to be candid on one end? On the other is I am so shy of shooting in the street that the people will get upset with me. So these are all photographs of people looking at the camera who have engaged with and who I photographed and have shown the photographs to, and I have spent a few minutes talking to them, at times more, at chai, even a meal, etc. So, hi, baby.
I love people pictures.
And these have been shot around the, sorry, this is in Tanzania. This is, I happened to be with my daughters in Vienna. This was, and we stumbled into this pride parade, which is happening there. I'm repeating this picture. I just love her. Just look at how serene she looks.
Wow.
I asked him, this is Madhya Pradesh at this Bhagoria festival. I asked him कि जो तुमने scarf बांधा हुआ है, तुम्हें पता है किसकी फोटो है इस पे? This is photo? अच्छा नहीं, देखो ध्यान से देखो किसी आदमी की फोटो है इसके ऊपर. So then he looked and said, हाँ यार ये तो किसी आदमी की फोटो है. And so he's responding to the colors, and so it happens to be, on the as a human face. But that's everything doesn't have to have a meaning. It has to, but it can still speak to you. And it's not just about the face, it's the human body is expressive. If you look at just the person's hand, the way he's holding his fingers, his body language, there's a certain tilt to his head, all of it speak to you if you look carefully. Here again, I mean, he's just such a wonderful old man. He's, at the Pride Parade, and look at how he's holding himself. It's, my dogs come to complain that, why are you? Wait,
Is that Tumki?
Yes, Tumki, yeah. Moti is too lazy to come up 2 flights of stairs. Tumki does spend a lot of time with me.
Mine is snoring at my feet, right behind the chair.
Mine has now got exhausted of complaining, so she's sleeping now.
He's sleeping here.
So it's interesting how apart from cameras, we also have dogs as a commonality.
These are Khanna people walking outside on the border area of Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. They're the nomadic tribes who they go from place to place. They're just so beautiful. And in Tanzania, like I said, I've been going into villages where cotton is grown. So these are off the tourist beat. And so I was lucky enough to be there at a time when there was this inter-village dance competition which was happening there. So these are not performances meant for tourists, but this is the way life happens for them. So at a ginning mill in Tanzania, and this is in Maharashtra. Gujarat. And interestingly, in Tanzania, a couple of years ago, the government made it mandatory for all students, for all children to be in school, especially in primary school. So much so that the penalty if a child doesn't go to school is that the parent can be fined or imprisoned. But what they haven't done is that they've not made provisions, yes, for all the students to be in school. So whereas this bench is meant for 2 kids, the 5 or 6 of them who've been squeezed in together. But I hope this is just a transition to a time when they can have better schools. So this again is from the competition just telling about.
That's lovely. So much energy.
Listen to this music, and there's such a similarity to the beat of this music and the beat of the tribals of Madhya Pradesh, and the Bhangra, for instance. It's my theory. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it's got to do with the heartbeat. It's got a similar kind of beat, which is what makes you feel like it's life thrumming. And that's again at the Bhagoria festival. So all these young men, come from a particular village, and they'll all decide to wear similar clothes, and then they strut around like these real Romeos, and it's great fun. Don't miss the glares, everything is just. And to end with, staying with Bhagoria. So while I was there, and this is something which I find really, it's a very personal thing. With the advent of the mobile phone and therefore being able to take selfies, and the fact that no one really takes things like portraits seriously anymore. And I have a particular love for portraits and the classical studio portrait because my father used to be a portraitist, and which of course while he was around, it wasn't something which I really was engaged with, but it's the seeding happens and then the tree grows later. It's kind of the truth about all of us, really. So I was there in Saint-Ouen in one of these fairs, and one of the things which was very striking is that there are these photo studios, makeshift ones, where they put up a tent and then put up a backdrop and people come in, and people get their photographs taken with such sincerity because they are getting photographs done for that one day in that year. And 20 रुपए की फिर एक print बनता है उसका वहीं हाथ के हाथ, and that print is very carefully put into polythene and then taken home and put up in the drawing room or wherever. And that entire process for me is something which I feel, oh my God, I love the classical studio portrait, and I love the fact that people take it seriously, because in cities people don't do that anymore. And so I was hanging around there, and the person whose studio it was asked, I said, listen, if you don't mind, can I just stand with you and take pictures of people who you're photographing? I won't say a word. I will not try and direct them, but I just want to see the portrait through your eyes in a way. So these are, to end, the 7-8 photographs. I've shot many of them. I spent half a day just standing next to him. And it's, if you look at the look, it's and how it's the sincerity with people are posing. It almost had me in tears, because I just felt so good about the fact that people take this seriously still.
I think we need to bring back this in India. This is just too.
I've been doing it, and it's an offer to anyone who's watching this. I've been doing the series called Mothers and Daughters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's a beautiful series.
Yeah.
It's my personal project. It's my ode to the women in my life and the women of this world. And it's an ode to the classical studio portrait. So it's about the chemistry between the women, and it's about bringing back the studio portrait kind of. That's the technique, and that's the content, really.
I think me and my daughters will trouble you one of these days after COVID.
Be my honor to take a photograph. So please just let me know whenever you're here.
So pretty. This is.
But just look at the color, it's just bursting. I mean, it's just like, I can't even dream of that much color, even though I've lived my life with color.
Seems to be the standard pose over there.
Hmm.
That's lovely.
That's one of my favorite photographs. She was just about getting ready to be photographed, and someone said something funny, obviously, and she just cracked up. And these are those lucky pictures which later I knew that something was happening. And, this is a photograph which everyone who sees this, because this is human, you just react to that expression and that moment. It kind of makes your day when you look at that kind of smile.
I have a twin for this photograph. I have an exactly similar photograph, but in Banaras.
Yeah. We've seen that, yeah.
It's kind of a moment.
Yeah. Just a moment that happened.
Yes.
Yes.
Finally, a new aspect to Dinesh.
Yes.
I love doing this. I mean, I rediscovered doodling. I used to do it in school, I remember, on the corners of my notebooks and what have you. Used to even get scolded by teachers saying, what is this thing that you're making?
But what is interesting is that your doodles are very abstract.
So really, what I've realized is, I'm looking at a lot of different kinds of art. And what my heart goes out to really is more tribal kind of art, both Indian and, Aboriginal. And I've been, in a way, practicing trying to draw. So what I do is I look at something which really interests me, then put it away, and then draw from my own mind.
Wow. That's intricate.
And hard work.
Wow.
Not work at all. There's a beautiful mindlessness to doing this. Because I'm not looking for a form, I'm not looking for a beginning or an end.
So now you understand what I do with my photography.
Exactly. Which is why I've always loved and respected what you do.
Thank you.
That's got more of a tribal sense to it. So the reason I wanted to share this, one, it's new and I'm very, happy doing this. The other is that find what engages you, what you love doing. And it's just not therefore about the camera or the lens or the paint or the ink or what have you. Those are the instruments of expression. But find what you want to express about this, what you want to engage with. Shukriya. Thank you very much for your patience. Oh my God, 2 घंटे से बोल रहे हैं.
That's fabulous. Like, come in.
Much for having invited me and given me this opportunity to share all this. I should stop sharing. There we go.
So Dinesh, thank you very much. It's really amazing, and it is so beautiful presentation. And I don't think that we spent 2 hours. I think it just felt like about maybe short 10 minutes or so. And I think the audience we have got a few questions. Let's take those questions first. Anupma, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. I will just start asking. So, Dinesh, how do you feel about seeking permission from your subjects before photographing them?
Good girl.
I would imagine the person's talking about street photography, right?
Yeah, the person's talking about street photography and people photography.
So if you are into what's called pure street photography, then it ought to be candid. And if your subject ought not to be aware of being photographed. So the question of permission does not arise because once you ask for permission, the person is conscious about you and therefore start posing, etc., etc. So that's one. So that's one aspect. The the way I operate, I don't think of the purity of street photography. I want a good portrait of a particular person. So I will first shoot, okay, and I call this my triple S formula. So the first thing is shoot. Then if I find that the person noticed that I photographed them, and depending on what I feel is the reaction, and I've been on the streets for many, many years and encountered hundreds and thousands of people, you can feel if a person is, upset or angry or indifferent. And depending on that reaction, then I will walk up to the person if I feel that there is some unease. And the second S is share. And the good thing about digital is that you have a picture on the screen of the person. So I'll walk up to the person and I'll show them the picture. Okay. And the third,
I think we lost your sound.
Yeah.
200 times a person says, "Nahi, ye to, aapko nahi kheenchni chahiye thi," वगैरह. And in front of them, very deliberately, I will delete the picture and show them the delete.
So, sorry, Dinesh, but I think we lost your voice. So you said shoot, share, and the third thing was?
It shoot, smile. So shoot anyway, whether it's candid or the person looking at you. Then if the person is looking and is aware and you find that the person is uneasy, smile at the person and deliberately, slowly walk to them. Okay. And third is share. And you share the photograph and say, "Hey, listen, this is what I shot of yours. If you have an objection, I will delete it. If you don't, then please let me keep it." And most of the time, at least in India, people love being photographed. People are friendly. If you are non-threatening and friendly, I've never really had a problem at all ever in this.
Okay. Thanks, Dinesh. The next question is, somebody wanted to know if a photographer should or shouldn't crop an image that they clicked. I think this must be in the context of phone photography, probably.
Okay, before I answer this, I just wanted to add one more point to the first question, which is important.
Yeah.
It's again, the photograph that you take candid on the street, whether the person is aware or not later, just keep in mind that as long as it's shooting on the street and you're not using the picture commercially, all right, you have a right to. But the law of the land, and virtually from around the world today, is if you're going to be using that photograph of a person for any commercial purpose, to promote any brand or product or service, then you need that person's permission. Right? And then it becomes a commercial transaction because you are getting into a commercial transaction. So it's about cheating if you use that picture, and I've never done that I've used any such photograph for commercial purposes. I'll always tell a client, okay, I know you like this, but now let's arrange to shoot it so that the person's aware of it.
Gotcha.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, the second question?
Yeah. Should a photographer crop an image or should they not?
As long as I was shooting film, for me, it was sacrosanct. It was, and I remember when I was working with my designer, Penguin, I said that the only condition I have is that you will not crop 1 millimeter of the transparency which I shot, because for me, the challenge was in that moment when I pressed the shutter to get everything perfect at that point. And that was very important to me at that time. But like I said along this conversation, that with digital, one has become more promiscuous, and the promiscuity is both in terms of the number of images you shoot of a situation and also what you do with the image. The way I see it, earlier, the only tools as a photographer you had was the camera and the lens. Today, the computer and the software in the computer is an extension of the camera and the lens. I'm still concerned with my vision and how I want to represent what I photographed. Now, whether it takes that moment when I shot it, or whether it's on the screen and say, "Yeah, ये left में जो चीज इसमें आ रही है, disturb कर रही है, इसको मैं नहीं चाहता, तो Photoshop से इसको erase कर दूँ या crop कर दूँ." I'm looking at the final image which pleases me for the way I want to depict that situation. Having said that, I have the luxury of doing this because I'm not a photojournalist and I'm not putting forth my pictures to the world in the guise of the truth. my photographs are my expression of that moment, right? And I'm not trying to fool anyone into thinking ये सही है या सच है. पर अगर मैं फोटो जर्नलिस्ट होता और मैं हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स के लिए या इंडिया टुडे के लिए काम कर रहा होता, and then if I'm twiddling, whether it's cropping or whether it's removing things, adding things, that is morally and I believe legally wrong.
And the last question, this is a non-photography question, but it says, are you fond of buying souvenirs of the places that you visit?
I used to do that a lot when my girls were young. I used to make sure I bought toys and clothes and fabrics from places where I went to. And I did that whenever I could. But as they grew up, they stopped liking what I bought for them because they had their own taste, what have you. And one of the things I was doing for a while, for instance, wherever I went, I used to buy bells. And in my house, for instance, there's an area where there are more than 2 dozen bells which are hanging from a particular space. So I've done things like that. Also things like, I used to like different kinds of footwear, so I would buy booties and chappals. So things like that. And like I said, for me, the bazaar has been a recession, and what people make and sell there is something which I find extremely fascinating. So things like fabric and all, even now I feel that I've got enough clothes anyway for the next few lives. So
I think Nidhi wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. So, all these people are very good photographers here, and all of them are very artistic. So they don't ask you that question. But what would be your advice to somebody who is starting on that journey? And is there something that you remember as being that turning point in your life where you thought, okay, now it is not just a passion, but it is becoming a way of living and a profession now? Like that poignant moment where you decided that it could be the way you make a living.
Okay, just to answer the second part first, for me, it's been a very meandering way in my engagement with photography. Like I did mention earlier, I did my learning about photography from my father, even while I was just 12, 13, 14 year old, because he was a photographer, so I had an access to camera and film and everything while I was still in school and at home. The reaction to that was that I don't want to be a photographer because my dad was one. But having got into advertising, then realizing that but my first love is photography. So it wasn't after 12 years that I quit to become a photographer, but after about 5 years of advertising, I said, "Nahi, mere ko nahi karna ye." And I told my dad, who was alive at that time, that look, I would want to learn photography and study it, and would you give me enough money to go to New York, because I was time pe tha ki New York mein achhe school hote. So he agreed, and I went. And I was there for about 7 or 8 months, and I was still, trying to get into a situation where I could get into a school because I have a social security number and I had this tourist visa. And that's why I was working in a bar, and I was, it was great. And then my father passed away in a car crash, so then I decided to come back. So that was, the end of that dream. And and there are these moments in people's lives which change your life. And that changed my life. I wanted to be a photographer at that time, but I couldn't become. I came back, joined back in advertising, but still my engagement with photography was very much there. But I couldn't be engaged with it because I was really into the thick of advertising at that time. Then having quit, then like I was mentioning that after about a year or so, I realized it's not just for making money, or it's not just for doing commercial work. I want to use photography as my means of engaging with subject which I like. And now I'm leading to the first part of the question, which is that more than photography, more than dance, more than music, more than painting, first understand what is it that makes your heart beat fast. आपको क्या चीज अच्छी लगती है, आपको कौन सा सब्जेक्ट आपसे उठ के बोलता है कि engage with. Because then when you use your art form, whatever that art form might be, you'd find it that much more enriching. Otherwise there's a vacuousness and I'm talking particularly about engaging with an art form, which if there is no meaning, and it doesn't have to be a deeper meaning, it doesn't have to be that I want to change society, change the world, but it should enrich you. And that enrichment comes from an engagement with the subject or subjects rather than an engagement with the craft. So at the end of the day, a craft is a craft, no? Which can be fun or interesting up to a point, and after that it becomes repetitive because you're not going anywhere. If you go somewhere with subjects which you, in my mind, that is what's very important.
So typically, what does the journey of a photographer look like? Say, I mean, there are a lot of people click very beautiful pictures, but they don't turn professional photographers. And so how does, I mean, how does one go about, say, exhibiting their work or making it get noticed, or do you get uh, do you get say an internship with a big house like National Geographic? Or I mean, what would you suggest to a youngster? How do they go about doing this if they want to turn professional?
To answer your question and to be brutally honest, at this stage of the world and photography, don't become a professional. Because right now things are really bad in terms of assignments, whether you're working as a photojournalist, whether you're working as a commercial photographer, or whether you're working as a landscape photographer. And the book is giving us these three options. This commercial means you're working for advertising, etc., which is in the terms of the economy is in the terms. Things like landscape, etc., is not really working because there are hardly any shows happening. The galleries are closed. People are not spending money because at the moment, buying of art is being seen more as a luxury or an indulgence rather than something which I feel fine about doing. And photojournalism is something which anyway seems to have died or was murdered by television news. Right? So there aren't so many jobs with magazines or newspapers as a photojournalist, at least in India. Abroad, it's still there. But even abroad, if you look at it, a lot of the major newspapers and all who used to have 2 dozen photographers at one time probably have 2 or 3 of them, and they work with stringers and freelancers. So a lot of things which I don't think people will have the patience for me to get into all that. But things like television, things like digitization, things like the internet, things like how news is disseminated, has worked in a way which is negative to the professional part of photography. Right? So I would not suggest to anyone that they should think of becoming a photographer. Having said that, if you feel that's your calling, all right, then engage with what you love photographing. Don't put pressure on that love to make a living for you. Pursue that love, follow that love, keep doing it. In the meantime, whatever else you might have done in terms of your graduation, keep doing that till a time when your work is of the kind which gets recognized and that someone says, I want to buy this. Right? But if you put pressure on that love to make a living for you, then the first thing you'll be disillusioned with is photography and you'll leave it. And which will not be photography's fault, it will be yours.
Yeah.
So, and remove the word photography, put dance there, put music there, put painting there, anything. If you get into any art form for the sake of making a living for you, then it's the wrong reason to pursue that art form. Okay? But if that art form does come to a point where you have the expertise or the experience or the eye or whatever, to be able to find the market, right? Then it's worth it.
I think we can take one more question. Anupma, you have a question, I believe.
Yes, I want to build up on what Nidhi and Dinesh just discussed. So, Dinesh, I totally relate with you when you say that you've got to keep working on your art form because you're in love with the form and you're in love with the subject that calls out to you. And then it has to become professional because that's how writing became for me. But my question is a semi photography question. I think personally, I am visually challenged in terms of frames. That's how I sort of like, I'm not a graphic person, is how I explain myself. So I don't see objects speaking to each other in terms of interacting in the form, in the shape, in the color. The question is, if a subject calls to you and if you have the ability to engage with any art form, is it theoretically possible to move on to another art form? So is it theoretically possible for me to explore photography and then maybe, discover a knack for it or maybe have an eye for it because of the ability to engage with art and the subject? Is that so this I'm asking from the point of view of people who feel like they can't take good pictures.
Hate my doodles because I'm very sure that I'm not going anywhere with that. But I'm also very sure that I am loving it. A few of my friends, because I keep putting it on Facebook, a couple of people commented, "Oh, new profession for you." I said, "No, for me this is just riyaz. ये मैं practice कर रहा हूँ एक नई चीज मेरे को दिखी है जिससे मेरा दिल धड़कता है. I feel blessed for the fact that I'm finding another interest. I'm not abandoning an earlier one. I'm not necessarily moving this to another point. It's not like photography is dead as a profession, so now I'm trying to become an artist. No, interest is something which is very interesting for me. The other, which I, for instance, I don't have facility for writing, and I really envy you for that. And I'm very honest. I envy people who can sing really well. And I said,
You have a whole bunch of them out here.
Because that's what earlier I used to always say that, when people ask me, what else would you rather be? I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a rock star who would come onto stage and he would strum his guitar and he was in some other country which he'd never been to before and people started singing that song. It's these are dreams. It doesn't cost anything to dream. But find what engages you and engage with that. And don't put pressure on that to make a living for God's sake. If it happens, you are doubly blessed. If not, enjoy it. Don't kill the enjoyment by saying that's a miracle.
Dinesh, I love your candid answers, very well. Fantastic, So we move on to our next section of the session today. And that is, so Sarika has done some groundwork. She has curated some images which are shot by members over the past few weeks. She's going to be presenting those images and we would like you to look at those images and give your comments on that. Yeah. Sarika, over to you.
The kind of comment I'm giving, this makes me very nervous.
Dinesh, your voice is slightly muffled. Can you just come closer to the mic, maybe? Yeah. Yes, Sonika, you were saying something.
No, I'm saying before we start, Dinesh, what I would like to share at this point is the members of our group. We started like from bare scratch. We are very, very, because, all doctors, a lot of doctors, a lot of other, people who are not photographers. They just share an interest in photography. So for them to kind of, we give them ideas and themes and share stuff with them. It's really fabulous how they are growing as a community. So I would like you to look at that, look at the pictures like that. It's really amazing.
What Sonika is saying, as Sanjay had mentioned in the beginning while introducing me, that I've also been teaching for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Over the years, I find it far more interesting, teaching photography to people who don't want to make it a profession, but who come to it because they're passionate about it. And they're doctors and they're engineers and they're pilots and they're nurses and they're teachers and what have you. But there's a purity to their interest in photography because they're not looking to make a living out of it. So the kind of engagement which I find for people who are looking at photography because there's a means of expression and communication, the very different from one who wants to pursue it for a profession.
Profession.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with pursuing something as a profession. Of course, you must. If you love something, like if I want to be a doctor, then for God's sake, I want to study to be a doctor, huh? And you should. But I personally am finding for myself that it is really enjoyable working with people who engage with photography for the sheer sake
Pleasure of it.
of taking pictures and saying something.
And de-stressing. I think a lot of them do
That
it.
is,
It gives them joy and it de-stresses them from their day-to-day life and takes it away from that. So it's really a pleasure to see their work.
and also see how it's been evolving over. I think it's been about like 17 weeks that we've been doing this now, and 17 themes that they worked on. Unfortunately, not been able to capture all 17 themes for you today, but just kind of starting off with what you showed everybody today, which is the colorful frames. So starting with that, this of course is a photographer that you know well, Shalini Mukeja. So these are two frames that she had submitted.
Or is it you just happen to have put this together?
Yeah. So now this is, in fact, Shalini Kohli is an amazing photographer out here. She's been actually following a lot of people on Instagram, and it's a passion. And I think she's somewhere very keen on food photography. So she keeps observing other people, and interestingly, she has seems to have a very good eye with the colors and the lighting also that she uses at times.
Compositions are really fabulous each time.
How she picks the colors, how she's placed the colors, how the colors are talking to each other, how she's used the graphics, the point of view, looking at things straight down, there's nothing to hide. There's a great sense of working with light and shade, especially in the picture on the right. You see there's soft shadows there too, which is helping give a three-dimensional feeling to the picture. She's been very sensitive to all that. And these are very mature photographs. It's not something which I would say is, I mean, if I have to find little fault, and I love doing that, why shouldn't I have got gray hair, is that she should be a bit careful about, if you look at the picture on the right, where the bowl is almost getting tucked, if she can give some more breathing space to that on the right, because you see there's more than enough space on the left. So there's no reason why her overall picture is getting unbalanced because of that. And the same thing is happening in the photograph on the left with the garlic at the bottom. There's enough there for her to be able to just take a bit more of the background and have the garlic not getting cut. Because these are the things which then, make a person
make it more perfect.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with the composition. There's great, use of color, the way colors speaking to each other, propping, the ambience, the light. But these are the little giveaways where a person seems slightly sloppy. So the only reason I'm making these points is because I really think she's doing a marvelous job. So why let this little bit of sloppiness?
Yeah, I hope she's listening, or she will be listening to it later on if she's not online right now. And I'm sure she would kind of take note of this. Moving on, so this is a photographer. He's an interesting character. He's based out of Satal. He's a conservationist. He does videos. He does photography. He moves around in the jungles.
He's got a great sense of balance, of symmetry. He's understanding how to place his objects. He's actually, this is a classical portrait. It's a classical portrait of these gods.
Yeah.
Sense of the time, of the environmental, factors, whether it's a fog or mist in the background, which is helping, bring out the color and the form of the board.
Making it pop more.
It's great.
This is an orthopedic doctor that we have on our group, Dr. Raju. And this is, I think, an image from his maternal home, place over there where he's got these.
There are these traditional towns where there's a there's a water tank in the center and there are houses around.
Yeah, and pretty colorful houses.
That's the language of the south, especially in Tamil Nadu and parts of Kerala.
Yeah.
Houses have these fabulous colors. I think I used to be from there in my past life. Color part stayed on. The only thing I'm wondering, which could well be because of the screen, that this photograph seems a bit hard and too contrasty. So I just hope that he's not over processing it. And a bit of the giveaway is what's happening in the sky. If you see that each of those soft clouds are actually ending up looking like, pieces of cotton, which shouldn't happen really. So
Okay.
there's a slight HDRing happening here, which is a bit disturbing.
Yeah. This is so picture on the left hand side is by Dr. Shelly Singh, and then we have Rajinder. So here we have Shashwat Nakwal, whom you know.
And the picture on the right, the picture on the left is a great, portrait. It's a lovely
Yeah.
contact and the color and the fact that it placed her just perfectly. And the energy of the one on the right, which Suresh Sharma has shot, is just, whoa. What a marvelous image. A sports photographer would put this in his portfolio.
Yes. This is a picture by Madhu Goyal.
Mm-hmm. Whoever's mentoring them is doing a fabulous job, I must say. So compliments to you guys for mentoring them. There's excellent images.
So we'll now take you through some of the black and white which was going on the last week. I don't know whether you had a chance to see any of them.
I have some of them here.
Yeah. So this is by Komal Gurtu. Both the images are by her.
Mm-hmm. I still don't know how to shoot a bolt of lightning, so maybe Komal can teach me that.
Yeah, why not? So this image reminds me of Kissa Kursi ka.
मैं बोलने ही लगा था कि भाई कुर्सी की फोटो ना खींचो, सारी कुर्सियां की बेरी
है. सारी कुर्सियां the cup. There's a patented right over there.
But lovely use of shadow and form. And if you see it, it's, the composition also in terms of how the lines are, working beautifully with the bed and the side of the bed and the back.
Yeah.
Excellent framing.
These are by three different people. We have Manas Arvind, whom again we've seen in Use Your Camera. Mm-hmm. And then you have Sanjeet and you have Poonam Singh.
Poonam Singh also, I think, of these three pictures, the only one I would comment on is the one with the tortoise and the doll.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why there should be so much of the negative space in the foreground, whereas all Poonam had to do was to tilt the camera slightly upwards and get a bit more of the head and a bit to the right to get the doll's other eye.
Yeah.
Those things disturb, especially since there's obviously enough space in the frame because there's a blank space on the plate in the photograph. It's not necessarily identical.
Yeah. So we have one by Dr. Luna Dheer and one by Asim Patel, looking at the architectural aspects.
The one with Asim is really very intriguing. The one by Dr. Dheer,
yeah,
just a bit over. It could well be because of the screen, but it's a bit overexposed. This same picture, if it could be a bit deeper, and the shadows were a bit flatter, it would be a lot striking. So also bring out the sky and the clouds in the back a bit. It's tending to burn out a bit.
So could it be helped a little bit with the post-processing also?
very good sense of composition. Again, if Sonal would take with a small suggestion from me, you look at the pillar on the extreme left, the fact that it's looking like it's falling back. All she needs to do is to be a bit careful about keeping the verticals vertical and the horizontals horizontal.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing that we have kind of tried, which we've been finding with a lot of architectural based images, is that people don't tend to kind of keep the horizontal levels in mind, or it'll be tilting onto one side.
It takes a little bit of
In the
practice
horizon.
to be aware of that.
Yeah. So this is a little, somehow it appealed to me what Kaushiki had done in terms of, although it's like a blurred image, but somehow it just kind of gave me that sense of movement all over. I'd like to hear what you feel about it.
And this just reminds me of what I was talking about. How with film, the camera and the lens was the extent of my tools which I could use in photography. But today it extends to the computer and the software which I can find in my camera. It's part of the creative process, and that's what Kaushiki has done. Is not restricted to just the camera and capturing the image, but want to make the image look like what the police on the moment felt like, and that's what this time.
So we have Sasti and Shalini out here.
I'm in awe of the kind of images you guys are showing.
This is again Shalini, our food photographer.
Shalini's got a great eye for this. Just again, the one on the left, if you could have just taken that candle on the right. And which, looks a bit off simply because everything else is upright.
Yeah. So I think that there are those small nuances that she needs to start working on now.
But she's got a sense of composition. She's got a great sense of light. It's just about learning to be careful. That's all.
Some macros.
Finding fault with what you're doing, especially when you're doing still life and stuff, it's just a lot easier because you can contemplate what's in front of you. Look at it for a while, move things around. Whoa. Interesting.
This is by Dr. Manpreet, our psychiatrist from US.
The use of the diagonal and tilting the horizon. See, either tilt the horizon so that it becomes a design element. Because if it tilts because it's a mistake or you are being negligent, then that's what it looks like. But when you take it to this point where she's actually made the diagonals, go from one corner to the other, then it's a design.
So it's interesting to see how they've been kind of experimenting with different kind of objects.
And I like the fact that, in these kind of pictures really can make out what they are. This is very vintage Sarika Dandona pictures.
Yeah, but what I'm also enjoying is the fact that they've been, like Kaushiki, for instance, out here is like, I think playing with some tiny spring, which he's worked on with some the colors and the backdrop color.
Yeah, and the moisture, the water droplets, and it's all adding to it. Patience. Shooting insects takes a lot of patience.
Yeah, I think this grasshopper one was really interesting. sharp.
And those, very agilely placed water drops, that dropped off any second. It adds to the tension and beauty of the picture. Very good.
And now we come to my favorite part. So what do you feel?
मेरे को बात नहीं समझ आई कि करते कैसे हैं. Really fascinating.
I think is Manpreet here? Still there?
She's there, yes.
I just stepped out. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, Manpreet, please explain your images out here.
The images out here, the first one, this is, I was making tea in the morning and there was this upper light which was coming in the pan and rest all is just bubbling. The water is getting ready. The second one, we were at the Disney World and there was a waiting line in front of a restaurant. So there was this painted ceiling and there was a pond, a stagnant pond, and this was the image that was coming in the pond.
Simple.
Simple.
Yeah.
Lazy
Huh?
photographer.
Lazy photographer. Yeah.
I have to always add that now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sanjay insists that I am a very lazy photographer.
बैठे बस. The absolute queen, no.
So yeah, so here's some painting with light. Now this is something again which she's been reading up and experimenting on her own.
It's amazing what all you can do with this actually, and the more she works with this and more forms and things that she can, she's well on her way to it.
Yeah,
Fascinating being able to do that.
these are of course more classic abstract forms. By Santosh Kirloskar.
Great awareness. So are people shooting these following a particular theme which is given, or?
Yeah, so every week we kind of give them a theme on Mondays, and so we have a set pattern of letting them, which is increased from 2 pictures to 5 pictures. 5 pictures now, yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody's on a photo posting list.
The best part is, other than the moderators, everybody takes fresh pictures. We are the only lazy ones who are using old pictures. I love the enthusiasm with which they take fresh photographs, and they take like 1 million. They all try out so much. It's wonderful.
I can see that with the photographs. It's people who are really committing themselves to finding the.
Yeah. So yes, with that we come to the end of this small showcase.
I'm very impressed, really. It's and that's what I mean by people who do things because they are enjoying it and loving it, rather than because it's just a profession or. And they're almost like stress busters. Let me move away from what I do with my life.
See, in fact, almost everybody, a lot of them out here are doctors with highly stressed lifestyles. No time, but they're still they're managing to take out time for.
Which is in itself, I find amazing.
Yes.
People are doing that. But
Amazing how much time they're taking out.
Congratulations to the people who are taking these pictures, and double congratulations to the mentors. You've done a fine job of getting them infused and guiding them.
In fact, we'll also probably talk to you aside on whether people are interested in taking it up more seriously. Then some of them can probably be guided over to you guys for the online classes, like you've been.
At least 5 people come together and they want to do a kind of a foundation course. So we can even do it online. I'm finishing a foundation course tomorrow. I was a bit skeptical, but it's gone out really well, and the people who are doing the course are very happy. They don't They say we don't want it to end. So I said, "Okay, yeah, well, that's good confidence." So I think
In
all of
fact, one of the first activities which I guess once COVID lets us get out of the homes in bigger groups is probably come over to Museo Camera and have a session there.
that would be wonderful.
Yes, I'm also looking forward to that. I have not been to that place, So that brings us to the next section of the last section of our session today, and that is. But before we go to that,
TLC, the live chat.
let's take time to express our gratitude to our special guest and to the members who have taken the trouble of uh, taking all those beautiful pictures and who are really participating a lot, and not just participating but also evolving in this journey of photography. Sonika, please do the honors.
Oh, it's such an absolute pleasure to be doing that. Dinesh, I've been following your work for so many years, and it's been such an honor today and such a humbling experience for me to hear you hear about your journey and hear you talk and your perspective on everything. And I think everybody on live chat joins me in expressing our gratitude for. I mean, you've taken out almost 3 hours for us. Really, a big thank you from all of us. And no, it was like the 3 hours just passed like this. It was so engrossing. It was such a big learning experience.
Really, entirely my
Thank you so much. And more thanks to all the members of the live chat. Every week we give you a theme, and we kind of have a little discussion on Saturdays, on weekends, Sanjay and Sarika and us, and then we kind of brainstorm as to what is going to engage the doctors better, how to get their minds.
How to get them excited for the coming week.
And you guys never disappoint us, whether you're writers, whether you're doctors, whatever profession you're in, and your kids, you never disappoint us. It's such a joy to see the entries coming in each week and how you've grown from week to week. It's really such a joy. Big thank you to Sanjay, because he has the patience to do this every weekend and through the week and everything, and how he keeps the group together. I think all the moderators and all the mentors, how that's
these groups being formed and just disintegrating and dying, but to be able to keep that going and keep the level of interest and enthusiasm at a high pitch takes a lot of energy. So really,
especially in times of COVID and pandemic. I mean, this group started as a live chat and it's literally become the live chat. It's everybody's constantly onto it. Like, I think one of the members or the moderators, she had put it the other day that she looks around her house and every post and everything in her life is about the live chat, what she wants to share with everybody. So everything has become like that. So thank you. Thank you so much for everything, all of you. And thank you once again, Dinesh, for your time.
Thanks, Dinesh. It was a real pleasure.
three of you, and thank you very much for all the people who are here and who stayed on. Really, it's just an honor. And I find this term rather strange, but I will use it. You are the frontline warriors. But gratitude.
So we come to the end of the show. Dinesh, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us a beautiful perspective towards your work, your life, and to various things in photography.
And since you're part of TLC now, so I hope that you will post some doodles of yours as well.
Yes, and we'll keep troubling you. We'll keep troubling you. Be involved. Please guide us. We are all evolving in the journey of photography, and you can be a great guide to all of us. And thanks to Sarika, Sonika for doing all the groundwork in the background, and of course to all the members who have been part of this journey, who actually make the live chat very vibrant and happening group.
How many members do we have, Sanjay? How many members have we grown to now?
We're almost 3,000, maybe about 30, 40 short of 3,000 right now.
Wow. Wow. Just a few months old.
Yes. We started in July, and it's 3,000 now. And but the more than the number, it is the quality of posts. It is the quality of engagement and how people are really involved in it, how enthusiastic they are. And we are doing diverse kind of things, from writing to singing to photography to food to medical topics and other things. So it's really amazing there. Thank you very much, and stay tuned in the live chat. See you again next week.
So thank
Thank
you once
you.
again
Good night.
for inviting me. And if I may, I would like to stay as a part of the group on Facebook.
Of course, of course. That's why I said we'd like to see you posting some of your doodles now, because there are a couple of people who are regularly posting on
We have
that.
painters too.
With great embarrassment, but I will.
Okay. Bye bye.
So thank you.
Okay, good night.